Welcome to Colors of Life. When Jesus resurrected, he gave a commission to his followers to go into all the world and preach the gospel. So today we're talking about missions. We're talking about obeying that command, the Great Commission of Jesus. I have in the studio with me a missionary and a partner to missionaries. Please join me to welcome Reverend Sam Putu and Mrs. Bimbo Epefan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you.
Thank you.
So glad to be here.
So, Reverend Putu, you are the International Director of Calvary Ministries. Can you tell us what Calvary Ministries does?
Thank you very much, Coco. Calvary Ministries, in a short word, it's a mission agency, an interdenominational mission agency. What that means that we're not a local church. We serve the local church by being a channel through which missionaries are sent out to places where the gospel hasn't been preached. And we do four major things. We send. The S there means we steer up the church towards mission by way of awareness and mobilization. We empower the church through training to do evangelism and do missions. We nurture missionaries, train them and send them to places where God is sending them to serve among unreached peoples. And then we develop new leaders, new missionaries on the field so that from the fields we go, people will rise up who will reach themselves. We also develop resources to nurture the new believers in the new field. We plant churches there who will stand as a witness to their own people when the missionary might have gone. So we do awareness, mission mobilization, training, sending, evangelism, church planting amongst previously unreached peoples. That's what Capro does.
Excellent. And Bimbo, you're a friend of Capro. I know you once went to visit one of the mission fields and that changed your life. Can you tell me about that?
Okay, it was 2002, end of September. A full-time missionary then, Chinyere Adeli, took a group of us women, I think about 5 of us, to Rumana and Hawang Bagi field in Kaduna State.
In Nigeria.
In Nigeria, yes. So Capro had stations there, reaching out to the people. So off we went on this trip, and I always used to wonder what missionary was all about. So on that trip, I met a lot of missionaries who were graduates, well-read, from all walks of life, and they had left all to serve God, to reach, to join God where He's working, to reach these people. And so that was it for me. My life changed. I just realized that, wow, you've been wasting your life all this while. You need, and I think that was it for me.
And then when you came back, I know you started an initiative called Godia.
Godia Project.
Can you tell us about that?
Okay, Godia Project was a burden I got from the fields that year when we went to reach converts, to sponsor children of converts, because when people come to Christ, they see the light. They begin to hunger for more. They wanted education. They wanted to be more than farmers who just farmed to just eat. They wanted their children to go to school, because Capro till today run schools in the fields. So in order to help them to educate their children, yes, I came back to ask my friends, and they did.
Fantastic.
To support some of those children, yes.
So, Reverend Putu, we have over 7 billion people in the world, and we understand that a little over 3 billion have heard the gospel. And that must present a burden to you whose interest is in taking the gospel to the unreached. So what in Nigeria, for instance, we have so many churches. What would you like to say to the Nigerian Christian, someone like me who's never been to a mission field, and what would you want to say to us?
First, I would like to congratulate the Nigerian Church. They've done a lot. They've come a long way over the past 100+ years. Remember that In Nigeria, the church has grown astronomically. Nigeria presently is the third largest evangelical Christian congregation in the whole world. So that's
Really?
growth.
Okay.
But to see, to whom much is given, much is expected. The Nigerian church can take the word if only we refocus our priority. The Nigerian church is a praying church. There are prayer movements everywhere. Where I live, Friday night, you can hardly sleep. Thank God for COVID, we don't have that. But mission begins with praying. But if only we can channel our praying to kingdom praying. That's where mission begins. Before Jesus said, go ye, he said, pray ye. But what are we praying about? Bless me, promote me, elevate me, rather than asking God. God said, ask of me, I will give you nations. So prayer is key. 2, we can send more. We have the Christian population. For every one unreached people group in the world, we can find 78,000 Christians to match. In Nigeria, we just have about 60 nations that are unreached. We have over 6,000 churches just in Lagos City.
So when you say Nigeria, we have 60 nations that are rich, you mean nation groups, people
The
groups?
tribes, people groups.
Okay.
That's what the Bible calls nation.
Oh, okay, wow.
Ethnic group.
Okay.
When Jesus gave the commission, remember there was no Nigeria, Ghana, so you can't be talking about country. Nation to Nigeria is a tribal ethnic group. Speak the same language and culture. Nigeria has over 500 nations.
Okay.
About 60 of them unreached. Just the church in Lagos can decide that we take one. And you may have 60 local churches to match one. Imagine we just sent one missionary, the rest of us pray and support him or her. It can be done. Remember, our job is not to convert those people. It's just to make sure they hear the gospel clearly in a language that can enable them to make a decision. Their decision can be no. We don't control the decision. So the church can send. We have the resources. If we can only prioritize, globally, the church spends less than 2% of our resources on missions. Globally. And I can say even locally. Yes, the church is trying, but the enemy of the best is always the good. We can do more. So we want to see the church pray more for missions, send out more missionaries. We're not saying send them to Calvary. You can send them on your own. We can help you send, and then support missionaries the more.
But that's not a very popular message. I can tell you that. We sit in church. We don't hear people asking who would get up and go to the unreached. We just don't hear it. So
Yeah.
where have we gone wrong? Because you said something about the church existing not for itself, but for the world. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. The church exists for 3 things. Upreach, worship, reaching up to God in worship, prayer, intercession. That's one. The church exists for enrich, fellowship, love, share, care. The church exists for outreach, getting the gospel out there. Too many churches focus on the first 2. Worship, welfare of members. But when Jesus set up his church, the church was meant to be a rescue mission to the world. Every other thing we do is to help us reach out, because God can replace us in worship. The angels in heaven worship better than us. God can replace us in love and care. If you don't clothe me and feed me, UN can, or a Dangote Foundation can. But you see, if we don't get the gospel out, nobody can. So we don't exist for ourselves. So one of the problems is we have a generation of church leaders who went to great Bible schools, but no mission was taught there. So they honestly don't have an idea. 2, many churches are growing not by evangelism, but by regrouping existing members. So if church starts by renting a good hall in a hotel, good worship, and then members gathering from other churches, there's no motivation to evangelize.
People are just moving from one.
It's just regrouping. And I always tell people, you can grow a church without growing the kingdom. The kingdom of God grows by one lost sheep from outside coming into the fold. Heaven does not celebrate cross-carpeting of church members. There's no joy in heaven for an Anglican who becomes a Baptist. There's joy in heaven for one sinner who comes in. So because of this, I've met many well-meaning pastors who told me, what you are saying, I never heard it in Bible school. I've never heard it. So it's also part of our fault as mission organization. Maybe we're not done enough to create the awareness and mobilization. So it's ignorance. But some do know, but some understand exactly the implication of mission involvement. You can't control a mission movement. It's a movement. And many churches wouldn't handle what they can't control. When the Lord set up the first mission movement, Acts 13, he told the church, separate unto me Paul and Barnabas, release them. That's difficult for a normal church to release something they can't control. That's also part of the problem.
Okay. And CAPRO is interesting. It's unique in that it's an indigenous African mission that has over 700 missionaries working in over 35 countries. And CAPRO was founded like 44 years ago.
Yeah, 45 years this year.
45 years this year. And I'm so glad I'm holding in my hand the CAPRO story from Africa to the world. I would really encourage as many of us that can to get hold of this book and read it. It will change your life. Reverend Puto, I'm going to read something from the book and pose it as a question to you. And it's in the introduction. And he says, a leader of another ministry once asked me to explain the reason why we in CAPRO, who do not pay any salary to our staff, were able to attract and retain a following, whereas they, on their part, were always short of manpower. I know most of your missionaries are graduates. They're people who left high-flying jobs or could have easily gotten, very well-paying jobs to go into the field, and they're not being paid. So can you talk to us about the Christian commitment and sacrifice, that part of the Christian life that we don't hear too much about?
Thank you very much. For us and for an average missionary, it's not a big deal. To be a missionary, you must first be a disciple. The missionary commitment is a basic discipleship commitment. In Luke 14, Jesus said, whoever comes after me must love me above father, mother, brother, sister, even his own life. So that's a basic discipleship commitment, not a mission commitment. I say, any one of you cannot forsake all, cannot be my disciple. That's why disciples don't talk about tithes and offering, because if you forsook all, what is 10%? You talk about all. So for us, and that's why missions is a business for disciples. The church is made up of two groups: multitudes who are following Jesus for bread and miracles and blessing, and disciples who are saying, where can we go? Only you have the word of eternal life. You always find those two groups. So when Jesus was to give the Great Commission, he didn't give it on the day he fed 5,000 people. He could have a multitude of bread-seeking people following him. He called the 11 disciples. He even waited till Judas backslid. It was to those 11 disciples he gave authority to go into all the world. So for us, it's about our discipleship. It's not a special thing. We don't congratulate ourselves for that. And then as disciple, you trust the Lord for your life. Even if you are CEO of a multinational company, disciples know that the just shall live by faith, not by what they earn. So if you are earning $1 million a week and you are a disciple, you surrendered $1 million a week to the Lord and waited for what he will give you out of it.
Okay. And Bimbo, you're a partner to missions. And I know not just CAPRO, but you just have a heart for missions. We need to go on a break now. When I come back, I'd like to ask you if there are people, and I'm sure there are people who'd be watching this show and are wondering, okay, I may not be able to go to preach to the unreached, but how can I support? How can I be a partner to missions? We're going to take a break now. And when we come back, we'll continue this very important conversation on fulfilling the Great Commission. Stay with us. Our conversation on Colors of Life today is about fulfilling the Great Commission that Jesus left his followers. We have with us in the studio today a missionary and a partner to missionaries. I'm going to now talk to Bimbo. Bimbo, you are a supporter of missionaries. There may be people watching us who, want to know, okay, I may not be able to leave what I'm doing and go to preach to the unreached. What can I do? Because I know you're a successful businesswoman, and yet you're actively involved in missions. What would you say to such people?
Well, okay. As a sender, as a partner is a sender. You pray, so you can pray first. You can pray, and that increases your burden. You can visit to encourage missionaries. Most times you might not have the language. Okay, so you visit to encourage them. You can give. There's so much resources needed that God has put in our hands as businesswomen, businessmen, everyday people that they need. You can also send. You can sponsor a missionary. Okay.
Reverend Putu, you've not just worked in the office like you are doing now as an international director, but you've actually been on the field. You've pioneered field work as a missionary. Now, how do you feel as a missionary? I've heard that it's a very lonely place to be. So what would you want those of us that are not on the field to know about the missionaries?
Thank you, Coco. When I answered the mission call, my pastor didn't understand it. He said to me, why don't you go to a Bible school, come be the youth pastor? You are doing great with young people. My friends didn't understand it. You're an aspiring businessman, potential great politician. Why would you want to leave all that? My parents didn't understand it. My father disowned me. So I was like, okay, what is this thing, God, you asked me to do? My pastor doesn't appreciate it. My friends don't appreciate it. My parents don't. So a missionary feels a sense of low self-esteem. From day one, you don't feel like somebody think you are doing anything worthwhile. So when you come along and affirm him, one of my high points in mission this past 33 years was going to a church in a city where I was invited to share my testimony. And a couple walked up to me in tears when they heard that I was disowned by my parents. They invited me for lunch. At the end of the lunch, they said, look, they gave me a bunch of keys. They said to me, these keys represent every key to the door in this house, plus a car key. Take this home today as yours. When you can't go home to your parents, get here. When I went to my first mission field, in 1 year, nobody wrote me a letter. The second year, my own sister wrote me a letter insulting me, telling me how selfish I was to have abandoned them to go my way. I was happy that at least somebody remembered me to insult me. Most people think what missionary need is money and stuff. We do, but the greatest need is a friend. Just someone to come along, remember your birthday, your wedding anniversary, and just those little things that make you feel that you too are a human being, you are worthwhile. Great.
Which is where people like Bimbo are just so important.
Yeah, so important. It's easy to write a check, but you know what? To give your heart to somebody, something else.
Different, and yet that's so important.
That's so important.
You did say something about the Great Commission having 3 parts. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Great Commission, I say, so everybody. Everybody doesn't have to do the same thing.
Okay.
The Great Commission is one commission, but it has 3 aspects. Just like you buy one's handset, there's a radio on it, there's a camera on it, there's a communication phone, the same machine. So there's witnessing, which is for every Christian. It's about you telling your story like the blind man. Once I was blind, now I can see this man. And you're like the Samaritan woman. Come and see the man who told me everything about myself. Could he be the Messiah? She wasn't even sure. The blind man didn't even know who Jesus was. But she had an encounter and was eager, passionate to talk about it. That's what God expects for every Christian. You don't have to know the Bible to be a witness. You go to court to witness. You don't need to know the law. So you are a banker, a member of the House, of a parliamentarian, a CEO, a plumber, an Uber driver. You can share your story. Okay. Then there's evangelism, which is actually a spiritual gift. Some people are gifted to explain the gospel. It's like being a lawyer in court. So take the witness as one person, the lawyer. Now, even if you are not gifted, you are expected to do the work. But there are people who, by their gifting, are passionate, motivated, so they do it as a matter of course. But evangelism is about telling the story of Jesus. My testimony is not the gospel. 3 of us here have 3 different testimonies, but it's one gospel. It's about the historical Jesus, the Christmas story, the Easter story, explaining to people and the implication of their lives. Now, there is the aspect of missions, which is the gospel to those who have not had an opportunity. Now, that is where God's priority lies. See, a man had 100 sheep. 1 went astray. He left 99. The unreached people are the 1 astray. And our God is a God who has bid for that 1. Not that he's more important, but you have a wedding party. You want to make sure that every guest has food. You so organize that no one table gets 3 plates when there's a table without a plate. Nobody has the right to hear the gospel 2-3 times when there's somebody out there who has not heard. When Jesus was feeding the 5,000, he told the disciples, organize them in rows. I didn't see Peter take the bread to one row and John followed. They made sure everybody got. So missions is about dividing this bread of life in such an equitable manner that everybody has a share, an opportunity. You don't have a right to call anybody an unbeliever until you've given him something to believe and he refused.
Interesting. And another thing you said before we came on the show was that a lot of the groups that are posing a problem to society now, even in Nigeria, like you've mentioned, Boko Haram, the militants in the Niger Delta, you did say that these communities are communities where the gospel has not been taken as effectively. We'll take a break now. And when we come back, that's what we're going to expound on.
Thank you.
So this is where we pause and we come back to hear about the importance of the Great Commission in social development. I've been talking to Reverend Samputu and Mrs. Bimbo Ikpefan on missions. To round off this conversation, we'll talk about missions and social development. So, Reverend Sam, you were saying that, at least in the story of Nigeria, the trouble areas, trouble spots, are usually places that have not been effectively evangelized, or we've not done enough missions work. Tell us about that.
It's not just Nigeria, globally.
Okay.
Al-Qaeda came from the Middle East, no gospel. ISIS come from the Middle East, no gospel. Al-Shabaab from Somalia, no gospel. Boko Haram, Kanuris are 5 million people. You can't find 100 Christians among them. No gospel. Fulanis are 10 million in Nigeria. You can't count 1,000 Christians among them. No gospel. Niger Delta creeks. Even in our cities, most criminals come from the poor parts of town. I was in Kenya, 90% of criminals come from Kibera, the poor estate. So it's a known fact that where the minds of people are not enlightened by the gospel and enlightened by development, it becomes dark and evil. So the gospel brings light and development.
And I'm going to talk about, Bimbo, how can partners help in this development aspect of the gospel?
Okay, like I said, Baba, my own personal story that I went to the north, Bagi in Kaduna State, and I saw the plight. People want to educate their children and they didn't have the money. So I came back and gathered women to, do that, to sponsor those children. So what am I saying here is that there's a lot we can do. Not only the gospel do people need, they also need development. They need amenities, they need, social development and all that. And that is a lot that the church needs to partner, send missionaries and also partner to do, improve their lot. Education, like the Capro story, everywhere you find Capro, there will be water.
Okay.
There will be education. At least they'll try, even if it's not so big, but they will try and see how the children. Something. So, that's where we should borrow from. Like Brother Sam, like everybody fondly calls him, said earlier, we are beneficiaries of that. missionaries came, and that is why we are here today. So we need to take the light,
that same heart
of
to enlighten
yes,
and develop society. Excellent.
yes.
And Coco,
Yeah.
the love of God people understand is the one they see first, not the one they hear.
Exactly.
So we're not bribing them to be Christian. Jesus healed 10 lepers, 9 went away. He didn't cast leprosy back on them. You're just genuinely loving them, because in most of those other faiths, love is absent.
So love is so important.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to leave us with as we round up?
Yes. The Great Commission demands 3 responses. You're either sending, going, or disobeying. In these 3, the sender is very key. We always think it's a missionary. But what is the use of a bullet without a gun to fire it? The missionary is just a bullet. What is the use of an arrow without a bow to shoot it? The missionary is just a bow. So don't think sending is just a sideshow. In the cycle of missions, how can they believe in one they have not heard? They need to hear. How can they hear without a preacher? The missionary is a preacher. But how can they preach unless they are sent? So at the bottom of mission is the need for senders. And any one of us can send. Adopt a missionary, adopt a field, and just invest time and invest prayer and invest goodwill and resources. So it's a mission possible.
And when you break it down that way, then indeed we see that it is a mission possible.
Yeah.
And we're so glad to have here today someone who's been sent and a sender, as it were. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and enlighten us. It's really been very moving, very eye-opening. Thank you.
Thank you for
Coco.
the opportunity, Coco.
Thank you for having us.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you. This is where we end today's edition of Colors of Life. I've been talking to Reverend Samputu, International Director of Calvary Ministries, and Mrs. Bimbo Ikpefan, a partner to Calvary Ministries, and we've been talking about missions. Remember to join us same time next week for another edition of Colors of Life. Please follow us on social media, share this video, and remember that here we seek to know Christ and make Christ known.